Nick Wright, Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the New Orleans Saints. His betting preview, I didn't realize Nick did this. I guess he goes through the lines of every game. Everyone's a gambler now that sports betting is legal. Nick Wright channeling his best Big Lebowski with this look, very disheveled. Nick Wright. Okay, Saints, Buccaneers preview. We're going to kind of talk about the game, give you some analysis, if you will. Let's go ahead and let Nick take it, and then I will react as only I can do.
Tampa plus 3.5 at New Orleans. This is, I mean, the concern here is Tampa going to be able to block New Orleans?
Okay, so New Orleans defense, very good. Underrated to start the season. They're an elite defense. New Orleans defense is elite. New Orleans defense is probably better than like Dallas's defense or some of those defenses we thought were really good before the season. The issue is that New Orleans' offense is so bad. The defense, I believe, is on their 11th, trying to go on their 11th straight game, maybe 12th straight game, of holding teams under 21 points. Bad part is, their offense hasn't scored 30 points in like a year and a half. The Chicago Bears, I gave this stat out yesterday. The Chicago Bears have scored 5 touchdowns on offense this season through 3 games. They're pretty much accepted as one of the worst offenses we've seen in a long time. They've scored 5 offensive touchdowns. The Saints, meanwhile, have scored 4 offensive touchdowns. So the Saints are actually kind of underrated for how bad their offense is. And, as first reported by me, Derek Carr seems to be ready to play Sunday. You have to wonder if the Saints will be even more conservative, which is, I'm not even sure how that's possible. I mean, imagining a more conservative version of the Saints offense, I don't know how it could happen. But will they be more conservative with Derek Carr? Being 90%. He's not 100%, you would assume. And that scares me. That terrifies me. Because if it's a conservative game plan with a defensive team in a divisional game, 3.5 is a lot of points. There's no way I would take the Saints minus 3.5. No way. Impossible. So, I mean, if you have one or the other, gun to your head, I think you do have to go with Tampa here. Because it's just, you're asking, here's a little gambling tip for you. You always want your motivation to match the team's motivation. The Saints have no motivation to win by more than 1 point, right? Like they just want to win. They just want to win the game. There's no motivation for them to cover the number, especially when you factor in the injuries. They want to win this as safe and securely as possible. If that's 1 point, who cares? If it's 2 points, who cares? Tampa has the motivation. Tampa has the motivation to keep firing, to keep it close. It's a divisional game. They're highly motivated to play hard. So if you took New Orleans minus 3.5, your motivation would not match New Orleans' motivation. If you took Tampa plus 3.5, your motivation to stay within the number matches their motivation to keep playing hard. If that makes sense. That's a bit of a high-level, advanced gambling tip. So I don't disagree with Nick on the number here.
That is a legit concern. This New Orleans defense is awesome. However, I'm getting Jameis Winston.
Oop. Nick, you must not have watched my video from yesterday. You must be one of the few who didn't watch it. But Jameis ain't playing, my boy. It's going to be Derek Carr.
And Dennis Allen as the quarterback-coach combo against what I believe to be a good defense. You have Baker, I think, frustrated after the performance against Philadelphia. And Mike Evans probably frustrated after. He did have the one amazing catch, but he had some drops where he left some meat on the bone. And this just feels like, in either direction, a 3-point game.
I'd agree with that. I think it feels like a close game. And another thing, I like I like backing teams off of a big blowout loss, which Tampa had, but that's kind of balanced out by New Orleans coming off of that collapse, because now New Orleans is going to be just as motivated as Tampa. If New Orleans would be 3-0, if they would have beat Green Bay, then you could say, okay, well, Tampa coming off of a big loss, New Orleans is 3-0, but both teams got a wake-up call last week. So that to me, that kind of balances out.
And so if I'm getting the 3.5, I really like it. This feels like a 20-17 game in one direction or the other. All the trends seem to like me on this. Winston is 8-19-1.
Again, Winston probably isn't going to play, but I know the stat he's saying. Winston as a favorite is terrible. Dennis Allen as a favorite is terrible. I think Dennis Allen's like 1-6 or something like that as a favorite against the spread. And Winston, like Nick is saying, I think it's 8-19. So these guys just don't do well in that favorite role. They do well as an underdog. I mean, underdogs generally do better anyways, but I think that's what Nick's about to say.
One against the spread in his career. Dennis Allen is one of the worst covering coaches ever, 39% against the spread. And Allen is 5-12-2 against spread in divisional games. And the Bucs, who weren't that good last year, swept New Orleans last year. Go ahead, DeMonte. It looks like you want to say something.
I think Tampa Bay is going to win that game, by the way. And also, I think if New Orleans ends up winning the game, the Jets are going to be really sick that they didn't call Jameis Winston a couple weeks ago.
If New Orleans, look, I would love for this to be one of those games where New Orleans breaks out and they finally put it all together. I have to check myself with these games because I have to kind of look at it from an outside perspective. Of course, the fan in me wants to say Derek Carr is going to come in riding on the white horse over the hill after his injury, and we're going to score 30-something points. But nothing has told me that the Saints are going to do that. Nothing. So if the Saints continue their offensive production and we score 20 points, 17 points, whatever, 21 points, it's asking the defense so much every week to all right, hold this team under 3 touchdowns. Hold this team under 20 points. That's hard. That's really difficult to do. And if the total, here's another high-level gambling tip. If you're projecting the total to be short, which we are, we're expecting the game to be low scoring, then each point that Tampa Bay is getting, in this case 3.5, is more valuable, right? Because if we're expecting, put it to you like this, if you know that there's going to be 30 points scored in the game, 3.5 of those points is a big chunk. If there's 90 points going to be scored in the game, 3.5 points is a relatively small drop in the bucket, right? Does that make sense? So I think it's going to be an under. I think it's going to be a low-scoring defensive divisional game. And if it's going to be low-scoring, it's even harder to give points. So that's the one thing that I think, in my heart of hearts, I believe, is that this is going to be low-scoring. I think the under would be the play. I think it's going to be a conservative effort from the Saints. I think they're going to get Kamara back involved, but I think he'll be on a pitch count. I think Derek Carr will start, but I think he'll play it safe. I don't think this is the game where they say, you know what, let's just let it rip. Let's let it eat. Let's let Kamara do all this stuff. Let's let Derek Carr sling it all over the field. I think this is going to look very similar, not to this extent, but I think it'll look very similar to the Bengals game plan against the Rams, where Joe Burrow played, but they kept it so safe because he was hurt. And they knew, like, we can't ask him to do too much. He threw very short passes, a lot of check downs, really quick stuff. I think we'll see the same thing. I think it'll be a run-heavy game plan. And, I wish that I was wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I might be. The Saints might score 40 points. Who the hell knows? But it's just hard for me to imagine, knowing how Pete Carmichael and knowing how Dennis Allen kind of go into these games and knowing the trends against them, how bad Dennis Allen's been in the division, how bad he's been as a favorite, as bad as he's been covering the number. It's hard for me to say they're going to go in there with a totally different game plan and just blow Tampa Bay out.
Well, that is a great point on the Jameis Winston thing, because now with Carr hurt, Winston's not available. Right. And if they had called him right when Aaron Rodgers got hurt, they probably could have gotten him. I think that is a really good point, and he would have been one of, if not my first phone call. All right, what's the next game?
Okay, so not a whole lot of analysis there. They were strictly talking about the number. You just never really know. Like, as a Saints fan, you just never really know. And we'll talk about this now more as like from the Saints side of things. You just never know what to expect from the coaching staff. You know, part of me would say lean on Kamara, lean on your playmakers, lean on Taysom Hill, help Derek Carr out, but get the ball out quick to Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, and we'll be fine. But they just don't seem to do stuff like that makes sense. It seems like that would be so obvious, but more than likely we'll get Kamara on a pitch count and we'll get a ton of Tony Jones Jr. or whatever. We'll run the ball 35 times. Taysom Hill will have 2 carries, and that'll be it. And we'll play a 14. We'll play a we'll try and win the game 2-1. We'll have a sacrifice bunt in the 8th inning to try and win the game 2-1. That's how it seems like the coaching staff goes about this. I want them to every single week. I say, prove me wrong. Pete Carmichael, prove me wrong. Dennis Allen, prove me wrong. Spread this thing out. Get creative. Win the game. Go win the game. Go dominate the game. Put the game on ice. Don't try and burn clock up 14-0. Don't keep pushing. And until we see it, it's hard for me to expect it, I guess. The Saints are going to win this game. But how will they win? I think they'll win in a defensive slugfest. I think 2017 sounds perfect. I think 2017 sounds about right. I mean, how many points? Put down in the comments below. How many points do you think the Saints are going to score in this game? Because if you say 35, how? I have to ask you how. And then if you say, well, Derek Carr is going to throw for 350 and 3 touchdowns, it's like, well, I mean, at that point, that's just a dream. At that point, I would love that. I would love for him to throw for 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, but we've just yet to see it. So anything over 24 points from the Saints, I think would be like, okay, we're here. And we're waiting for that game. Once we see the Saints offense click, I think then it's like, all right, the season starts. If the Saints offense clicks this game, if it's 35-14 and we're rolling and we're using all of our playmakers and everyone's getting involved, here's a stat for you. I'm paraphrasing. Since 2022, I hope this is right. I just put this in a comment. That's why it's on top of my head. When Taysom Hill has more than 45, I think it's 45 rushing yards, the Saints are like 7-0. If he has less, they're like 2-11. Again, that's like an obvious thing this coaching staff should know. Get Taysom involved running the ball. Get him mixed in there. Hopefully we do. If we get him involved and Shaheed involved and Michael Thomas and Olave are doing things and we're being creative, there's no reason we can't score somewhere between 24 and 28 points or 21 and 28 points. But I'm just scared we're gonna be in a 6-0 situation at halftime and we're in a slugfest the whole time. I don't know. My prediction for the game, my official prediction for the game, is 2017 Saints. I think the Saints do win. It's going to be conservative. I'll tell you that. I hope I'm wrong. But it's going to be conservative game plan for sure from these guys, especially with Carr being hurt. Let me know in the comments below what you think. I'm going to the game, so I won't have the recap for you immediately after like I do on away games. So tune into my Twitter, which is down in the description. If you tune into the Twitter, I'll be giving updates from the Dome more than likely, depending on how the Bloody Marys are flowing, ladies and gentlemen. Let me know in the comments below. Give me your score prediction. What's going to happen? Who dat? Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next video.